All right. Hello. I'm Sebastian. I practice HEMA fencing, and I'm a bit of a sword enthusiast. I like all kinds of swords, and as such, I do also consume quite a bit of media that portrays swords and fighting. And I've recently noticed a sort of trend where people discuss the prequel saga of Star Wars. And I want to do an analysis, or I have done an analysis, and this is sort of a follow through where I explain the results of my analysis of the fight on Mustafar between Anakin, or Darth Vader, in his youth, and Obi Wan Kenobi. So I have watched the fight a few times through in slow motion, thought about the context, tried to figure out what they're doing, and I've written some notes. I'll be referring to them but not reading from a script, so this is mostly off the cuff. I apologize for my setup. It's a little bit Spartan, but I'm working I'm working with what I have. So let's just start off and watch the fight. This is not the best viewing experience for you, of course, but you can open another tab and watch the fight. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere. So. Right, the opening move of the fight. There's a lot of different ways you can take this. There's the thematic approach, which the visual and what he's doing and how he's repeating it in the fight and how it changes the results. Anakin jumps 3 times during this fight, and every time fails, and it has different consequences each time, more or less. The degree of consequences differs. The first time, he's pushing back Obi Wan, so that's fine. The second time, he hits the control panel with his lightsaber. So the Mustafar facility, whatever, starts like going into fucking. Shit starts exploding. Lava starts erupting. Everything goes to hell. And the last time is the somewhat infamous "I have the high ground," which I'll get to that at the end because I think it's thematically appropriate to consider that at the end. But there's 3 jumps, and they all don't really work in terms of swordsmanship, even if they do work thematically. The thing is, in swordsmanship, one of the most important parts of fighting, well, any fighting really, but especially in swordsmanship, is footwork, your ability to move in relation to your opponent. And what happens when you jump, especially when you jump up, is that you lose your ability to move. You're essentially, ironically enough, grounded, anchored. You're unable to change your motion while you're in the air. If we take a look at, for example, at kendo, they have a specific type of footwork. My camera doesn't really allow me to show my feet without fucking everything up, so I'm going to represent my feet, or feet in general, with my hands. These are toes, right? So when you're standing with your feet together, you're like this. And if you were, say, boxing, you would have something like this. And in HEMA, you would have an even wider stance. And in fencing, you have something like this. Kendo is very particular in that it's not martial arts. It's a sport. They've pared away everything that's unnecessary for optimal performance in kendo, the martial sport. It's a sport. So what they've done is because your opponent is always in front of you, and you're always inside, they've optimized the footwork for specifically that thing. So instead of having a wide and balanced stance, something like this, you would have just this, very close. And this allows you to do very quickly changes in your momentum, your direction, and where you're going. So it allows you to essentially control your distance and direction in comparison to your opponent, in reference to your opponent, constantly. That allows you to constantly remain in control and do small corrections and try to find an opening. When you jump like that, essentially what you're doing is you're getting completely hung up in the air, and you can't do any changes. So from that perspective already, it's terrible. If you can sort of hyperbolize this and think of it in like gaming terms. I've played quite a bit of Team Fortress, Quake, games like that where you have a rocket launcher or projectile explosive weapons, which allow you to do something called a rocket jump. Essentially, normally when you jump in the game, you're like, beep. But with a rocket jump, you're shooting a rocket at your feet and jumping at the same time, allowing you to get a much higher arc. This allows you to get the drop on your enemies. So, on its head, getting the ability to go over obstacles and attack people from above is a huge game changer. It allows you to, flank and move very quickly, allowing you to do maneuvers people wouldn't expect you to be able to do. But when you get to a certain level of gameplay, people just become able to counter that because you can't move while you're in the air. You can, of course, airstrift and stuff like that, but you're kind of stuck in that arc you're going through. You can slightly adjust that, but you're still falling and you're going through a very predictable route. So, at higher levels of play, things like air shots with rockets and whatnot become, well, essentially a death knell for you if you try to rocket jump. The same thing I think is very important to understand in this context, where because of how fast and responsive and well-trained Jedi are, they should be able to just instantly defeat an opponent who jumps like that. And the thing is, in the second jump that Anakin does, you can see very clearly when Obi Wan pretty much completely counters it. And I'll show it to you when you get there. You can, like, we'll pause there and discuss it then. But, like, the concept of jumping high up is terrible in a sword fight. Another example, in more modern terms, I haven't played it myself, but like Fortnite, when you or PUBG, I haven't played them, but like, well, shooters, when you come with a parachute down, you're slowly falling. That's an even more hyperbolized example. Tribes is a good example. Well, any game with a lot of flying distant targets, if you can't control your movements, then you are essentially a sitting duck. Something else, let's take this for example. You can see it probably. When Anakin jumps, he also loses nearly all ability to draw leverage against the ground. Swordsmanship is about the ability to brace yourself against the ground with your feet and hit something hard. With a lightsaber, it's not really necessary to get that kind of force because the lightsaber just cuts through anything. You don't need big motions. It just cuts through anything, near anything. So, on its head, you don't really need to worry about losing your ability to take support from against the ground. But the thing is, if it's another lightsaber in the way, and it's a sort of hard block, then what would happen is, when Anakin hits Obi Wan, it would sort of be like this. The blade completely gives way and falls over. A good visual example of this would be, imagine yourself flying in zero gravity. You're in the middle of nothing, you're just floating in the air, and then you have a sword or a stick or whatever, and you reach out and hit the wall. You hit the wall. Well, what'll happen? You think you'll actually cut through the wall? Not really likely. What likely is that will happen is you'll start pushing yourself in the opposite direction. You'll start floating away from the wall because of the impact. Same thing here. Because Obi-Wan has good support against the ground, he can block hard, whereas Anakin doesn't have any kind of support, so he'll lose the exchange. So I really can't find any good reason to do that kind of jump, except that it kind of fits Anakin's flashy personality, I suppose. So it is storytelling. Another thing I think about this opening is that I think it's a reference to another sword fight. I think. I'm not... I don't have the actual references for this. But like, this came out in 2005, I think. And the James Bond movie, Die Another Day, with Pierce Brosnan, appeared in 2002 or 2003. And there was a sword fight there as well, which starts out as a fencing match. And then they up the wager with a blood diamond, and they move on to like using actual sharp sabers. And the villain in that is a very similar framing, where Brosnan, or Bond, is standing from the, let's see, in relation to you, is standing essentially like this, and then the camera pans to the bad guy, and the bad guy does the sort of walking away, and then he surprise attacks over the shoulder. And it's framed in a rather similar way, I think, to what happens here. But the difference is that the Bond villain, he stays on the ground, and he's much closer, so his surprise attack could realistically work. Here, because it's such a huge arc through the air, the jump, Obi Wan would have a very long time to react to that. So, as he could do, just stop it and unbalance Anakin and cause him to fall to the ground or something. He could power through it. He could step to the side as he does in the second jump, which comes later. There's a variety of things he could do, but he doesn't because reasons. So just this opening alone is kind of, I want to hate it, but like I mentioned, it's a thematic thing, something Lucas is trying to tell with the imagery. So it's terrible, but I can't hate it. Okay, enough of that. Let's let's keep going. And this exchange here is, again, like, let's go back and just watch the exchange again. So here's the jump. Yeah, okay. You can see here, Anakin's in the air. We've explained it already. The jump is bad. Jumping is bad. Actually, I forgot about this. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but like, one of my teachers, early teachers in HEMA, he mentioned that he had found a military saber manual where it was written. I think he said it was Swedish at the time. I tried asking him afterwards recently, and he said it could have been in German. Anyhow, what he said was, the text says when you're saber fighting is that rörelse av uppåtled är av ondo. That's the citation as I remember him saying it, which basically translates to upwards motion is of evil. So it's evil because when you go up, you lose control. There's I think it's Falcon Cup. There's this Polish HEMA tournament, Falcon Cup, I think, or Falcon something, and I think it's 2016 or 2017. There's this saber fight where the opponents are just jumping all over each other, just jumping on top of each other and just falling over, and it's jumping is bad. We're moving on. So the second exchange, the flurry of saber hits here, that thing, and it continues for a good while. Yeah, it's a fairly long exchange, like 3 seconds. It's multiple hits, and when I first looked at that, when I first saw that, I was like, what the hell are they doing? Are they doing house? No. And then I slowed it down. I had to slow it down a lot to figure out what they're doing. And until I found out that they're essentially doing unconsciously, possibly without intention, doing a German Zwerghau, which is essentially a strike where you put your thumb on the flat of the blade, and then you kind of do a chopper motion over your head, and you hit like this. And it's a really good motion. I believe Meyer writes that if the Zwerghau would be removed, half of the art would be lost. So it's a superb technique. The problem here is, even they're doing a Zwerghau, they're doing it really, really wrong. The thing is, I'm gonna have to stand up for this. On camera, it's kind of hard to say. I'm gonna take a lower stance. So a proper Zwerghau, I don't know, crouch. Zwerghau is on this angle. So you can see the sword, it's on this angle. What they're doing is like this. And that is kind of bad for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which, you're literally sacrificing extra range because you're doing this. The reach of your sword is getting smaller. Secondly, you're also getting weaker. When you're doing it properly, you have excellent structure. You can use your shoulders and your hips to power it. It's a great move. It's fucking... But when you change the angle to this diagonal, very steep angle, you lose the ability to use your shoulders to power it and the hips. So essentially you're just using your shoulders, just the shoulder muscles. So this is very weak and difficult to hit. And more than that, if you look at my center line, the Zwerghau, the proper, I can go very far. I can cut through things. But with this, I'm going to call it the overhead diagonal chopper. It's like a chopper motion. It's the ODC, like this, you can't go over your center line. My wrists just don't go there. I can't do it on either side. Here, I have to let go. So essentially, you're losing, like I mentioned, reach, but also the ability to put force into it and to go beyond the actual cutting, the center line for cutting. What more? What more? It's a really dumb thing. Like I spent probably hours just thinking about how stupid this ODC thing is. Like, the counter to a Zerk is another Zerk. Either you do it on the same side or on the different side. And you sort of block them out and then you hit them with your blade. Like, you block them here and you hit them here. So you do two things at once. Here they're just blocking each other. And it's just terrible. Like, if either of them did a proper Zerk, they would win instantly. Cut off the hand or the head. Like, instant win. That's how bad this technique is. It serves no purpose. Like, the only reason they're doing it is because they're stuntmen. And they're doing, not stuntmen, they're actors doing choreography. And what they want to do is rollback. One of the strengths of the Zerk is that when you hit an opponent like so, if they guard against it with a heavy guard, not a heavy guard, a frontale or a kron, the basic parry, it's a very strong parry, a firm parry. If they do that, they extend themselves much to the side, opening this side. So you can bounce off their sword from the impact, ding, and hit really fast on the other side. And if they block there, you can also hit there and bounce off. And once they get into the rhythm, you can just sort of juke them out. So it's a really good technique. It's fucking excellent. Here the problem is, not the problem, the reason why they're doing it is they want to be able to have a opening flurry of movements that's very flashy, furious, and just explodes at you with sound and flash of light and everything, motion. So they're doing is they're bouncing off of each other's swords. So they meet in the middle. So the only reason this ODC works is because they're actually both aware that they're doing it. And they're doing it specifically just to be fast and hit each other on the next dig. So, it's bad. I don't like it. It's very bad. Have I read anything else about that? Yeah, that was everything. I'm gonna check my next point and let's move on because I've already talked quite a long while. I think this is gonna be a long video, I suspect. Okay. Next part, let's see if we find it. I'm gonna slow down the video so I can find the exact part. I'm not gonna go forward or backwards. I'm just gonna slow it down. Continues. There's a flurry of techniques, kind of usual garbage. What I wanted to show you here is this part, where they both spin, but Obi Wan is first in place. And here, this part, they're both spun, and you see the position where they are in. Anakin is still spinning, and Obi Wan is in position to hit. But what happens here is Obi Wan puts his sword into a guard, and it's there before Anakin actually hits. So you can tell it's a choreographed thing. This is, ironically, excellent proof of something that is known in HEMA and swordsmanship in general. That is, well, the best way of explaining this thing is to reference to George Silver. He's an English, I would say, swordmaster maybe. He wrote a couple of books, one of which is A Practical Treatise on Defense, in which he outlines why certain attacks it's difficult to explain when you don't have this book on hand. Basically, he explains that there are 3 times of the body, I think. I haven't read it in a long while. Essentially, what he says is you can attack with the hand, you can attack with a lean of the body and the hand, get more reach and more power behind it, more oomph. And then you can attack with the hand, the body moving, and a step. So you get reach, and even more reach. And because you have more of your body committed to an attack, you get power, even more power. But this also means that the first attack is the fastest. There is the least amount of mass being put into motion, therefore the least amount of inertia. So the light hand is faster than the heavier hand and body. And that is like lighter and faster than the hand, sword, body, and foot. The whole stepping through, when you actually step with your whole body. So what this means is there's a sort of balance, a meta for how you can actually use a sword. This is, I think, particularly prevalent in saber fencing, where you can do with the wrist, you can do with the elbow, you can from the whole body, the shoulder. So fast, weak, stronger, slower, slower, slow but strong, slow but strong. Essentially, you see it perfectly here. I'm going to take a little bit back. Yeah. So what's happening here is Anakin, or this actor, is going through much longer motions. He's spinning around his entire body. He's using his feet, his entire body to move, which means that he's slower. He's just slower. So when they start from the same cue, they're doing choreographies. They think, hit, okay, now we're moving to the next hit. I'm supposed to do this. And the other guy thinks, okay, I need to do this. So of course, if they start from the same moment, if they hit, the one doing the longer motion will be slower. So this is pretty common in this fight, where they just do these huge motions, spins, when they don't need to. And they even attack, like George Silver talks about attacking in true time, where you always move with the hand first, and then the rest of your body follows as necessary. And doing anything else is an attack in false time. And a lot of that happens here, when they're not attacking in a way that is sensible, even for a lightsaber. Anything else in this exchange? So we're in this part, and I think I remember my next point, but I'm going to still check it out, just so I don't forget anything. Silver, time of the hand. Oh, yes. The next part is this. See, look at what Anakin is doing. You see what he did there? He essentially took his sword, his lightsaber, and he forced Obi Wan's sword out of the way. What did he do with that? He kicked, for some reason, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like, in the moment when you're thinking of using something, in the fight, in the moment, if you use the sword, you're going to be thinking about the sword. You've used the sword, you're still concentrating on the sword. You're not really thinking about, okay, I can kick now. So what should reasonably happen there is up, and then he just brings the lightsaber down, and just cuts Obi Wan. And you see here that completely open. Obi Wan's lightsaber is over here. He doesn't have time to react. Like, if he had time to react, then when the foot hit him on the chest, he would have cut the leg. He would just do that. But he doesn't have apparently time to react. So Anakin does a kick to kick the other guy backwards instead of actually cutting him. They're on a longsword technique where you kick someone, like in the knee, and you break their knee, or you kick it in the chest to push them a little bit back, and then you cut them to the chest. But still, you're trying to actually do some damage. These kinds of kicks, the chest, see here, the torso, they don't really do anything. Like, there are security cam footage of fights happening where, like, let's say a martial artist who's delivering a real fight tries to defend himself, and he kicks the opponent in the chest, like, boom, really powerful kick, and the guy just flies back and gets back up. Like, it knocks the wind out of him, but he just gets back up because there's no actual damage. The same thing here. A kick like that just pushes them back. That's worthless, isn't it? Like the first thing I was taught in karate about kicking and hitting was that the power should be such that when you hit a wall, your hand goes through the wall, not pushing back the wall. You don't want to knock down the wall. You want to go through the wall. So this kind of motion, just ignoring that he's not even hitting with a lightsaber, the kick he's using is dumb. Like, instead, kick him with the knee, break his knee. Okay, then you incapacitate him. You can continue from there. But no, it doesn't happen. Oh, it's kind of annoying. Anything else? Yeah, no follow-up. Yeah, this here, I like the footwork. They're moving from side to side. It's a little bit skippy, but it's skippy in the sense of, like, it's a little bit jumpy. But it's the sense of jumpy as you see saber fencing. They're lunging to jukes and stuff like that. So, and similar to, you see, set techniques used against someone, a retreating opponent. They're trying to break the line, win the central line, like moving from side to side. So the footwork I like here, so it's good. But the thing is, like, why are they hitting each other? Like it seems kind of purposeless. Like they're just pushing back against again. It's not achieving anything. It's sort of vapid, I would say. And here again, you see like Obi Wan is in a guard, and he's just holding the guard, and Anakin just hits it again. This happens multiple times in the entire fight, where they have a guard and they just hit it twice from different sides. So the attacker achieves nothing. The defendant should have actually reacted to that and just done technique from there. It's a little bit annoying. Next point. Oh, that's a little bit further on. Okay, you can watch a little bit of the fight now. Let's see if I can find the part I was thinking about. I think it was this I was referencing this. Yeah. This, I think, is a good example of here. Yes, here. So Obi Wan does pushes the lightsaber to the side, and he wins essentially the confrontation. He could just push forward, and hit Anakin. And Anakin, his hand is again, wait, whatever. What happens? Actually, that was a little. Let's slow it down so you can see what I'm talking about. This exchange here. Obi Wan has done the side, flick to the side. It's kind of awkward, but whatever. So Anakin's sword is up here, completely out of the way. What does Obi Wan do in this position? Does he extend and just cut and like win the confrontation? No, he pulls back, a huge pullback, and then he goes for a thrust. So that was the point I've written down. In this fight, pretty much universally, they're holding their hands forward when they should be holding them back, and they pull their hands back when they should be just pushing forward. Like here, he should have just pushed forward, but he pulls back. And when I said that they hold their hands in the front, and that being a bad thing, I seriously think that these guys don't understand what a lightsaber combat would be like. The choreography doesn't reflect that at all. Like, when you look at the evolution of swordsmanship in Europe, you notice a trend. You go from weapons like, let's see if I can just take the specific weapons out. You go from weapons like, come on, you bitch, like this, Viking swords, with which you had a shield. Why would you have a shield? Well, because there's not much hand protection here, so you have to protect your hand. We don't actually have manuals for shield techniques from that era that I know, but we do have buckler techniques, which we can assume are somewhat similar in what you're trying to achieve. With the buckler, I don't have a buckler. I don't practice buckler that much. I've done it in a club, but I don't do it myself personally. With a buckler, what you do is when you strike, you cover your hand. When you strike, you cover your hand. When you thrust, you cover your hand. And you try to find a bind, and then when you know that you can like knock their sword and shield aside, or you can use your sword to knock aside, you attack with a free weapon in your hand. So you bind the sword down, you punch with a shield. You knock his shield to the side, you hit him in the head with a sword, or you thrust them. So when you have little hand protection, you need to have a shield. Okay, so, but if you don't have a shield, what kind of weapon are you using then? Well, you use something like this. Longsword. This is a two-handed weapon, so you can't really have a shield. Well, how is that reflected in the art? Well, you generally tend to keep your hands close to your body and away from the opponent. A lot of the guards are essentially something like this, You have guards when your hands are extended like this, and you point at an opponent, you threaten with a point, but you don't really stay there, because if you do, you're going to hit in the hand. Sorry about that. My camera's memory ran out, so I had to sort of copy it over and get some more space again. Where did we stop? Right. How did we go from European history a little bit? How did we go from swords like this to swords like this? And what is the difference in how you use them? The thing about these weapons was you had to shield with these because you had to protect your hand. If you didn't protect your hand was gone. So slowly, pretty much in a linear evolution, in my opinion, you went from weapons like these to weapons like these, where you had a shield on the sword, essentially. This one doesn't have that much protection. I think the best examples are the Italian cup hilts, where you literally have a bow, essentially here, protecting your hand from absolutely everything. And these are very practical. And it shows because it changes how you use the sword. If you look at like these early one-handed with shield techniques, usually you do not have your sword out. You have it hidden behind your shield, close to your body, away from the opponent. You might have it hidden behind your shield like this, but you never really have your hands out in the open like this. There's actually one guard like this, I can remember, so anyhow, but this hand here is away from the opponent. And it's the same with these. And, well, two-handed swords, you have different kinds of guards you can use. This is my personal interpretation again of something, so it's not perfect. It might not be 100% valid. But when I've studied Fiore di Liberi's longsword system, I noticed that he has 12 longsword guards. I'm not going to go through them, but he divides them into 3 categories, which are pulsative, instabile, and stabile. Pulsative is essentially guards where you can really lay the smack down. Pulsative essentially means to smite, smiting guards. So when you're using a pulsative guard, you're like essentially your sword back like this. It's like a baseball, so you can really hit someone. Stabile guards are sort of the opposite of that. You're not sort of springing yourself to hit, but you're sort of just resting. You can be there for a while. And you have your hands usually, pretty much always, your hands close to your body, or backwards, or away from the opponent. The last category is the instabile, which it's a bit of a difficult translation. It's not unstable, but changing, varying, mutating, unstable. And those guards are essentially longa. Actually, that's not longa. This is longa. Your hands are forward, or fenestra, or ox, as it's known in German. Your hands are forward. They're kind of in danger. They can be hit. So you don't really stay there. Or in my opinion, the instabile sort of refers to the fact that you can't stay there. You go there because they're very useful. They're very, very useful. But you can't really stay there because you're just going to hit in your hands. And you can see this evolution happen with how you can't keep your hands forward, but you kind of want to because you can keep your point online with the opponent. You see this evolution, how swords change. When you start applying, you had longsword, and it didn't really change all that much during its lifetime. There's the Swiss saber, but that's whatever. You look at like weapons that arose at the same time. You have something like this. This is a practice version of a langesmesser, a long knife, which is essentially a peasant version of a sword, sort of. And they were doing essentially the same techniques as the longsword. If you look at like Küchner and Talhofer, the techniques they show there, they seem to apply a lot of the principles and mechanics you find in longswords. So you probably had someone who went, hey, I could do this with another sword, let's try it. What they noticed was that you couldn't really protect your hand with just hands with one hand. You were really in danger all the time. So what they did was they added bits to the sword. So you have this nagel here, which protects you from this angle. More protection. After that, in that period, we had weapons like the dusak, which is essentially a training weapon, which kind of looks like this, actually. Like, imagine this whole thing was made of leather, so you hit someone with this. And from these evolved sabers and, haggers and everything with a knuckle duster. More protection. And what did these mean for swords and how you use them? Well, you started to eschew guards like this, where you had it really back and you were holding like, oh, don't hit my hands, don't hit my hands. You started going through stances like this, where you stand with the point forward, the hand really extended, because you can trust this thing to protect your hand. And thing out of the way. And you can see this in other weapons as well, like and martial arts and sports. In kendo, one of the key, one of the zones you can get points from hitting is the hand, the kote. So they consider it a very viable target zone. Like they took away 90% of the body, left just the head, the throat, the hands, and the body. Everything else doesn't matter. You can't hit there. So the Japanese consider it important to be able to attack the hands, and you can see that in the way they hold their swords. I have this. Like you might think when you see someone doing kendo that they're holding their sword out and they're very vulnerable like this. But in kendo, it's very specific. Actually, I'm just going to keep this. It's very specific how you hold the sword. It's one fist forward from your hara. So it's a little bit below your navel, your center of mass. And you have it there. So it's actually not an extended position, but very withdrawn, kind of intermediate. Like if you compare this to Fiore's Italian longsword, the kendo position would not be a instabile. It's not a longa. It's more closer to breve, the short guard, which is, as far as I remember, a stabile guard, because your hands are very close. So in kendo, it's very important to protect your hands. You look at other martial arts, sports, fencing sports. You think it like I've done a little bit of epee, and what I noticed there was when I started, I'm going to use this as an epee. Pretend this is an epee, a sports epee. When I started out, what I did was out of guards like these, I tried to adapt my longsword techniques to it, and it worked because they weren't used to it. But when they got used to it, and when I was against more experienced fencers who just knew how to effectively fence, they would just get hits on me. They would dominate me because it's very light, and there's only so many ways you can do it correctly. And one of the things I was doing wrong was I wasn't protecting my hand. When you have the foil and the epee, this big bowl here to protect your hand, you're supposed to use it. When you see my hand from here, you know I'm doing something wrong. I should bring my hand in line with the cup, with the, I forgot the word, croquette, whatever. But see, the way the foil works is that there's a little button here, and you press it against, let's say, the ground or the opponent, you get a point. A circuit is completed and you get a point. The exception to this is if you hit something metal, like the bowl here. So if they just thrust at you here, you protect your hand, they don't get a point. But if you holding your hand out, what an experienced foil fencer, or not foil, but an experienced fencer who knows how to use their foil, they'll hit you first in the hand and in the body. So they've got 2 points for one motion, essentially. So you'll lose your hand, and then you'll get stabbed in the chest. So protecting your hand is very important there too. What else? Oh, right. Filipino martial arts. There's this concept called defanged snake. Essentially, if someone is attacking you, they're extending their hand. So the easiest way to defend yourself against that, according to this principle, is to just attack the hand. You defang the snake. So if you have a knife, you have a short blade, you have a stick, if they try to hit you, time it right, keep your distance, and hit their hand. Disable their hand, cut their hand. You're not killing them, but you are making them less dangerous. So, and in Filipino martial arts, they don't really have weapons with hand guards, complex hand guards. So that is, again, supporting this interpretation. My point of view here, what I'm saying, my argument here. Essentially, when you look at the Jedi, what is a lightsaber? I have a stick that I thought was good. Yes, this is my old nunchuck that broke. It's a very good facsimile of a lightsaber hilt. So you have this thing, which is quite similar to a kendo, I would say. Well, not really. Ignore that. It's very bare bones, very minimalistic, and you don't really have any kind of hand protection on this. So how is that reflected in the art? You see them fence with a lightsaber. It really isn't. They don't protect their hands. They don't keep their hands away from the opponent. They don't, try to go for the hands and, end the fight that way, non-lethally, like cutting off the opponent's hand. Even though in Star Wars, if you cut off an opponent's hand, you've won. That's just a rule. Like Luke, Anakin, Darth Vader, Mace Windu, kind of. He got zapped, but he had essentially lost by that point already. Did I say Dooku already? Dooku. Everyone who ever tried to approach Obi Wan in a bar, if you get your hand chopped off by a lightsaber, essentially you're done. Like the pain must be so unimaginable that you just give up. You're done. So why don't they, with lightsabers, go for the hand? Just a quick flick. But when I spar the longsword, I'm gonna put it this way. Okay, this thing. When I spar with this thing, one of the first things I always do is I try to find a bind. I tentatively reach out and see what they do. And if they come to the bind, I'll try to get on this side, because I'm a lefty. I'm a filthy lefty. And from here, what I'll do is, because I have the left hand and they're in the right hand, so on this side, it's the right hand coming from this side of the sword. The left hand is here. So if I'm on this side, all I need to do is bring my sword down. And I can back away doing that. If I do that, and I hit them, I've essentially cut off their hand for free. And if I miss, what do they usually do? They go for my hand, because it's completely open, so I have to protect my hand. So, with a longsword, even with this heavy longsword, as I've explained, you have to protect your hands quite a bit. And then you compare that to the lightsaber, which is this insanely light and nimble thing, essentially. Where you could immediately flick and cut off someone's hand. Just flick, and the hand is off. And they don't reflect that in the way they fight at all. So my point was, when they should just extend their hands and keep their hands forward, they don't. They pull their hand back and do a huge strike for no reason, because the lightsaber doesn't need momentum to cut. And when they should be holding their hands back to protect them from the other guy's lightsaber, they keep them forward. So they should be losing their hands constantly. I find that very annoying. It's very unrealistic. From the sense of just basic longsword, and if you apply the properties of a lightsaber, it should be even more obvious. More important, more obvious. I haven't talked about it a bit now, so I need to refer to my cheat sheet. Let's see. Foil. Mesa Nogel. Disarm, yes. Yes. Okay. Next part. This is going to be a little ball again. Let's actually put it on normal speed again. No point in being this slow. I didn't talk about that wrestling thing, but it was like was it there? I can't remember. I'll talk about the wrestling and grappling later. It's very flashy. Here, this part, not that part. I'm gonna slow it down again because it becomes more precise when I go back. So here, Obi Wan essentially, that's a kendo technique. I've seen that in kendo, where you I'm gonna take my suburito. Essentially, what you do is you do this motion. It works. And what here he does is, instead of trying to slap aside the sword, or get it to the side, he's slamming it into the control panel. And there's just one. This is a nitpick, but it's a problem anyhow. They're way too far up at the tip. If you really analyze like where they are, and Obi-Wan will be really weak because it's a short lever, so it's difficult to really at the tip. Incidentally, if you look at a long sword, it's not really. This is a super. In HEMA, we divide the sword into parts. On the blade, the most important parts are this, which is called strong, and this, which is called the weak. And they work in different ways. Essentially, because this thing is a huge lever, I can push powerfully with this part. So it's strong. I can defend against anything with this. This is far away, so it's a lever. It's very weak. It's very difficult to push something with it, really the tip. And that's what's happening here. With that far up the tip, when you're doing that kendo technique, you don't really see it in HEMA because the long swords are too long, in my opinion, for it to work. If you're that up at the tip, it's very difficult to actually exert pressure against the other guy's sword. Because what he would do is, if you just take this, if you're pushing like here, okay, I can't do just one hand. You just move your tip slightly like this. It's easier to do with two hands. This is a little bit very awkward. If they try to push through the tip, you just go on the other side. Just a tiny motion, tiny flick, and you would get free from that. But it doesn't happen because they want to slam down there. They should have been lowered down on the blades. Like if you're right at the tip like this, it's so easy to just lose it. Like Anakin could have, this motion. Like this motion, he's free. This motion, he's free. This motion, he's free. So easy. So many. He would have had to actually be assisting in holding his weapon there. And I think you can see it if you look at it in slow motion. It's kind of difficult to tell who's pushing. Because I think they're both doing the motion like this. They're keeping in contact relatively, and then they're both doing this motion. Even though, realistically, Anakin would be fighting against it. Or not just following along with it. There's no point for him to just follow along with being pushed around. Yes, this is why I didn't talk about the grappling earlier. Now we get to this. All the grappling and grabs in this fight, I would say in Star Wars in general, are kind of awkward. You'll see a little bit more better in a couple of seconds. If you look at Obi-Wan's hand here, he's holding his lightsaber. Grab this one again because it was fun to hold. He's holding his lightsaber right next to Anakin's head. He's being grabbed here. So, what are those MacDojo YouTube video things about, like, how to protect yourself from knife attackers? Is that you control the wrist, control the attacker. Essentially here what's happening is he's not controlling. Anakin is not controlling Obi-Wan's wrist. So with the lightsaber, because he doesn't need any actual momentum, he can just move it like this. But, bye-bye Anakin. Bye-bye Anakin. And it should be so simple to understand. I don't know why they did that. It's very flashy, very showy, and like very cruel. Anakin is like, you're gonna die. But from a technical standpoint, it's just awful. It's very awful, very awful. And that was similar with the spinning grappling things earlier, in that they don't really have the body mechanics to force the opponent to do anything. Like they're spinning around and grabbing the guy. If you don't have the ability to draw reference from the ground, like your feet are planted on the ground and you actually are able to pull, and you can't force someone who's of similar strength and weight and size to do anything unless they're helping you. So the grappling it's fake. It's fake as fuck. But let's move on. I probably have to again. Let's see cheat sheet. Grappling bad. No wrist control. Oh yes, yes. Yeah. They start. Go ahead again. Kicks. That was decent, I guess. But here, complete garbage kick. Didn't even connect. That would not work. Just would not work, because a foot in the air, in that, like, without, to kick someone so that they fall over, you have to have your hips in line. So you're essentially, you have the ability to use your hips to drive them or something. There, the foot is just sort of like in the air. And if it's just Anakin's much greater mass against the foot in the air, Anakin would just power through it. He wouldn't. It's the kicks are awful. Most of the kicks in this fight are awful. Like, there's no. The kicks are awful. As an umbrella judgment, the kicks are awful. In long sword fencing, I only know of 2 effective kicks. One of which is you're in a high bind in Fiora, and you step forward, but instead of just stepping on the ground, you put your foot essentially against your opponent's knee or into their thigh, and then you step through. So essentially using your weight to just step into them. It's not really a kick, and that's effective. Another is if you're too close and you need a little bit of distance, you kick them in the chest lightly, not lightly. You push them back like a little bit so you can just bring your sword down on them. But not kicks like these. These are just fucking terrible. Ugh, make no sense. More terrible kick. No. This, another thing I hate. It might just be the YouTube compilation I'm watching. I'm streaming it to my video player for easier control. But it's the YouTube compilation. I haven't watched the movie in a long time. But like, this fight has a really fucking annoying tendency to put them in a really interesting spot, and then he cuts away and they're just out of the situation. What the fuck? Look at Anakin. Anakin is in the shitter right now. He's in a really bad position. You would not want to be there. I've talked too much. You would not want to be there. This is a bad position to be. Okay, how does Anakin get out of it? I don't know. He just fucking got out of it. Drink. Prepared some drink. Sure keeps me going. That points for that too. Terrible kicks. Yeah. Set up interesting situations. Don't follow through. Very annoying. Yes. Okay. This is soon coming up one of the really meme spots of the fight. Everyone has more or less had to argue. This is one of those exchanges again where sometimes they'll hit, like one of them hit a guard and the other one hits the guard twice. So like tick tick. So there's nothing is really happening. It's just what the fuck. See, 2 hits at the same guard. It's just what? Why would you do that? It's just weird. And again, they're doing these very low circles, as I mentioned, like the second exchange. The very low circles that are very weak, so you can't, like if it was a proper circle, it was a guard, you could actually push against it. You could gain the center line and you could do something from there. You could, continue from there and do something interesting. But because it's this weak piece of shit thing, you can't really do anything from there. You can't push through because you fuck your wrists. You can't really gain the center line because it's fucking awful. It's just awful. But I know what they do. It's because they want to be able to hit the sword. And I'm holding them like this, but actually like this. Like this. I'm gonna hold them like this. To ensure that they hit each other, they're always trying to aim for this part of the sword. Normally in fencing, you work here, or if you're doing a really long attack, you would be hitting something like this, and the defender would be here. And then they do something. But they're doing this because they want to ensure that they're always hitting the sword, not each other. So dig into these situations. Okay, so that necessitates that they go into a very, instead of a spheric proper, they have to go very low to ensure that they're able to hit like this, or into the guard. See, because if you go in higher up against this, the amount of space that they feel safe hitting shrinks and becomes much more difficult to hit. So it will be more challenging to do more realistic techniques, because it will be more dangerous. You know, realistic techniques for swords are dangerous. Kind of. Well, let's move on. I have more points. Oh yes, this I don't like. I mentioned I don't like the footwork earlier when they were like moving backwards and sort of like this motion. Here, they're not moving. Their footwork is terrible. They're just staying stationary, just trying to hit each other. Which, a big part of, fighting with the sword is about the center line. The center line is pretty much universal in any kind of sword art where you have contact with the other opponent, like the opponent's sword. With really short weapons, like knives and daggers, it's not really as important. But with swords, spears, of nearly every kind, it is really important that you understand how the center line works. Anyhow, I have more about the center line later. Let's talk about that then. How it relates to this part is that because they're not moving around each other, they're not actually trying to contest each other's center lines. So when you have two opponents and you have the same center line, they're both facing each other, they can't really hit each other like this. But if one of them moves like this and changes the center line, they can hit without the other person hitting. And if they try to push upwards, the center line is already taken, so they can't get there. So in sword, two-handed swords, in fencing, in pretty much everything that has to do with swordsmanship, if you have the center line, you can just straight up win, because you can't be contested with just the sword. And so no footwork, it's bad. I'm just getting stuck in the loop. Let's go forward. This is one of those parts that everyone has laughed at, I think, or then they defended it vehemently. The problem I have here is, the defense I usually hear is that they're so used to each other that they're juking it out. They're playing mind games. Okay, that can happen, but they're way too close for that. See, if Anakin extended his wrist, he would have hit. And this sword is way back here. He can't really do anything about it. Extend, would have lost the hand. Extend the wrist just upwards, leg is gone. The sword is completely in the back, completely unable to do anything. Just completely unable to do anything. Okay, so it ends. But there's a couple of situations that I think both have at least two, where they could have just hit the other guy, and the other guy wouldn't have been able to do anything. So, what kind of mind game is that? It's a zero-sum. Not a zero-sum. The idea of a mind game is that you can't do something because if you do, the consequences for you will be too bad, right? So you're psyching them out. But how do you psych someone out when they couldn't even, you should know that you can't get hurt from that situation, because the sword is completely out of line. You just, and then you go backwards, or you guard. So you do the cut through, just extend your wrist, same motion, just extend your wrist, cut, and the lightsaber is coming, possibly in a retaliation strike because he's angry, but you just cut it in half, and you block it. If you can block any of these strikes, if you just block doesn't strike, you should be able to do extension of the wrist, attack, and block. It should be simple, but whatever. Here, I think I want you to pay attention to the fact that they're essentially equal in the force here. Their force push is essentially completely equal. They're both getting blasted back. So neither is noticeably stronger in just, telekinesis. I'll get back to that later. Here, this is the second jump of the three I mentioned. Here, Anakin's, thematically, it still works because Anakin is getting more and more into the fight. He's getting deeper and deeper into the dark side. but he's getting angry, so he's jumping and just chasing after Obi-Wan. And what happens is that he activates the control, he smashes the control panel, and things just start going worse for him. But the problem here is that Obi-Wan here does what he should have done in the first jump. And he gets out of the line and steps to the side. And now he's essentially completely outflanked Anakin. He has a completely uncontested ability to attack Anakin. Like, if he wants to kill Anakin, head, shoulders, whatever, wants to disable him, okay, go for the arms, get the legs, he can do whatever. Just chop the muzzle bit. Here. Just if he doesn't want to hurt Anakin, just cut off the lightsaber. It's disabled. He could do that. He's literally able to do that. He doesn't do that. He hits the lightsaber. On top, like, Anakin hits the lightsaber. Everyone hits the light. Like, it's the panel, it's the lightsaber. Why would you? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck is going on? What the fuck? And like, just going back again. No, that far. If you think of this scene from Anakin's point of view, imagine you're on the table and you're jumping at him. You can see him on the other panel, and you're jumping through the air. Oh. And then Obi-Wan is already getting out of the way. Would you still hit the panel when would you still hit down when Obi-Wan is here? Wouldn't you, I don't know, something that way? Why would you hit the panel? Doesn't he have eyes in his head? It's, they're both stupid. They're both stupid. They're both very stupid. Very stupid. Really stupid. But thematically, Anakin, first jump, he was pushing Obi-Wan back. Second jump, he's getting pushed back now, and he's getting punished for this because the facility starts going into overdrive and exploding and everything. So things are descending into hell. His madness, his drive to kill Obi-Wan is just making things worse. It's thematically appropriate. Also, what I mentioned earlier, interesting situation. This is the last time we were in this situation. Anakin grabbed Obi-Wan in the throat, and then we had another interesting situation like this. How do they resolve this one again? Like, Anakin is now twice. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Obi-Wan didn't do the first time, like the sidestep that he's doing here, but he did the second time. That could be construed as him improving in the fight. Like, he's observing, he's staying calm in the head. It's like, okay, he did this before. Now I should improve what I did from the last time. Instead of going backwards, oh god, I should sidestep and do something. So that could be construed as an improvement, but he gets a perfect kill shot there. Yeah, perfect chance to just end the fight. Perfect chance. End the fight. He doesn't take it. It's motherfucker. But again, last time we were here with Anakin's lightsaber being slammed into a control panel with Obi-Wan's lightsaber on top of it, Anakin grabbed Obi-Wan in the throat. Okay, that was an interesting continuation of the situation. What happens here? They cut it off. We don't even get to see it. The most interesting part. Like, I want to see what's happening. If you can make a sword fight, at least let me show what's happening. God fucking damn it. Yeah, I know the shit's going down. We could show it in the background with flashing lights and everything. But yeah, cutting away from interesting situations. It's annoying. It's annoying. Let's see if I can. And I think we have gone through. Yes. Jumping bad. Obi-Wan sidestep and miss. Yes. I think we are done with this one. And we're moving on to the bonus round. Oh, yes. Continue the fight. Here. Kick. This before this. Bad kick again. Sort of. It's not terrible, but it's still kind of bad. Here, Obi Wan is doing this twirl, which you can do that. It's you're a little bit too close for that, especially because they're Jedi. The Jedi are really fucking fast. Miyamoto Musashi writes that there should be no play in the sword. There should be no play in the hand that holds the sword, because if you start playing around and twirling, you're essentially lowering your guard. You go into the guards, the postas, because their effective position is to fight from. You're optimizing you're hitching your bets, optimizing your stance, trying to like make sure that you don't die. You start playing around, essentially this close, it's just inviting attack. Okay, if you're setting up a bait, you know, like, aha, and then bam, you punish a quick attack. Okay, that's one thing. But here, I don't. Okay, it's a movie, whatever. It's a movie. Here. He's leading with the hands. He's leading with the hands instead of like the blade. So, Obi Wan should just, bring it forward, the lightsaber, and cut off his hands. When your hands should be back, they're forward. When they should go forward, they're back. It's clown world fencing. I think let's see. Good changes there. Nope, never mind. Where was I? Kicks are generally bad. Explain. You mentioned few other kicks already. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Again, this is the basic kick bad, but like again here, just sword down, kick, Y. You can finish the fight. Fucking hell! If you can kick, you can probably strike with your sword. Probably most of the cases, like when they show in the movies. You could kick someone when your swords are like bound and you can't really do anything. You're stuck. And you want to break the situation. You can kick them in the leg or something, or knee in the groin or something. You can do that. That's effective. These kicks are bad. High kicks are very situational. But I like the footwork that the West had there. It was kind of good. I like the start. Here, this part, I think it's really good. I think like the balancing on like like you can't trust your footings. You're like oh, hey, ho. That's good. I can't fault this at all. Essentially, because they're like whoa, fuck. It's really good. Pipe, good. Yeah, I think it was here after there's another. Bad, yeah, that was just bad editing. I don't know what happened there. Like I slowed it down. I'm like, huh? What the fuck happened? It's just weird. Whatever. The music swelling, the tension, the lava. This scene, from just a purely visual spectacle standpoint, it's some of the best I've ever seen. Like I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I can understand why people are, because this is just George Lucas, excellent stuff. The problem again here is the problem here again is that they have no fucking wrist control. They're holding each other here, and they have a lightsaber which doesn't need any force behind it to cut. So you could just bring it down and cut off the other guy. Just again, no wrist control. This is just bad. Like yeah, they're struggling like this. There's lots going on, but when you're in that situation, like. The thing that this fight doesn't accurately represent is the mindset of someone who is in a duel. Like when you get into sparring and tournaments, you have to usually have other people around to follow what's going on and shout halt. And if there's a tournament, there's a judge with a big fucking stick to go in the middle and go hey, back off. Because when you get into the fight, you get so really into it, you get tunnel vision, you ignore everything else. You can't hear other people talking, but sound just disappears, and you just focus on this one guy. You think, I have this sword, I'm gonna hit that fucking guy. And when you see these situations like when they're like this, I know in that situation, because I've been there. I've been in these situations, in this stretto, in this ring, where you're like in sparring, like, oh shit, I've grabbed his arm, he's grabbed my sword. In situations, you're thinking about is, how the fuck do I hit this guy? And you just go for it. And if you have those lightsabers, in that situation, I would just, fucking like that. Because I've done that. I've literally just changed the grip. I've been grabbed like this, like here. And it's not like pushing here, like Fiona shows. You push me away. Just grab here, try to control me. I've changed the grip and brought it down. Because I can just drop it and it does a decent amount of damage. In theory, it would be a sharp sword and would fall on their head. So it would be an incapacitating blow at least. You can do that if you don't control the wrist. What should happen here, and what happens in longsword fighting at least, quite often, and just similar situations happen, where you grab the opponent's sword and they grab yours. So two different sets of hands are holding the swords like this, or like this. Not with a lightsaber, but here we have like the hilt. And if they hold the hilts, then they can control. I can control this sword and I can control this sword. So I'm not allowing either one to hit me, and I'm maybe trying to hit you, or my opponent. So we have this kind of like situation. And like, even from a storytelling point of view, I think that would be superior, because one of the things that bothers me about the end of this fight is that, why does Obi Wan pick up Anakin's lightsaber? I mean, I know why, because he has it in A New Hope, like a sort of memento from his old friend. But in that situation where he's tired, he's spent, his best friend is in the fucking lava dying. Why would he go for the lightsaber? I don't get it. Like, in that situation, he's shell-shocked, he's tired, he's just exhausted. I don't understand why he would go for the lightsaber. Like, it seems like an alien thought. It would require too much energy, too much effort to justify that kind of action to yourself. You would just, in that situation, I would be so tired, I would be so distraught, I would just leave. So in that situation, I think it would be better if, like I said, we would hold like this, each other's sword, lightsabers, and Anakin would have this moment where he just goes, fuck my lightsaber, fuck you, and he punches him. So they would get separated again, because what happens here? What happens here? Cut away from the interesting situation. Cut away. We don't see the conclusion. What happens? That's super fucking interesting. And they don't show what happens. Like, I said it was one of the best fucking moments. Like, it's one of the best fucking moments. Like, everything, the music, the visuals, the fighting. Like, it's great. And then they fucking cut away. What the fuck? What the fuck? Wait. Okay, anyhow. So, continuing that situation where you had, like, both are holding each other's lightsabers like this, like, trying to... So what happens is Anakin would be so fucking pissed, he would let go of his own lightsaber, because like, fuck this thing, and just fucking punch Obi Wan again, because he's done it already. So he would be holding Obi Wan's lightsaber, Anakin, and he would like, he doesn't even know, he just continues, goes straight back to fighting, and you would have Obi Wan go like, what the fuck, like, holding up Anakin's lightsaber, oh, what the fuck situation. And then at the conclusion of the fight, you're gonna have Obi Wan just exhausted, and he's like, lightsaber. And he's holding on to Anakin. He doesn't even realize. He just forgets it. He's shell-shocked. His best friend just died. I think that would be better. I think that's, well, I think that would be good. I think it would be good. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to move on to this now. I said about cutting away again. There, bad editing again. Like, I don't know what happened there. Like, jumps, it's awkward. The cutting, so it's kind of bad. I don't like it. Wrist control, cut away again. Other ones there by editing just there. It goes from here essentially. The fighting, whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna keep talking because in the background. What follows is sort of music. When they start like climbing around and swinging on ropes and surfing on the lava, I can't criticize that because that's sort of, I have no real background to be able to analyze that. Maybe you could find like a 16th century pirate who was like, "Arr, he shouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be swinging like that." Arr. But I can't really say anything about it. So the rest of the fight is just like pure adventure movie feel. I fucking love it. The fucking music, the visuals. It's a great fight. Even if swordsmanship is absolutely fucking terrible. It's just ass. It's absolute ass. And like, the opera works because it's a huge space. It gives the sense of like, oh, ho, ho, big room, huge space. Like, other people use like this song in like their fights. They usually have like in small rooms, and it just feels cramped. It feels wrong. It doesn't work, in my opinion. Oh yes, swinging on the fucking ropes, like a pirate movie. I love it. Fucking love it. Let's see what my notes say again. Yeah, there. I'm not gonna go with the rest of it. The rest of it's just whatever. I mentioned the high ground as the last jump. It was 3 jumps. I mentioned that I can't hate it, even though it's kind of terrible. The jumping, the first and the second and the third jumps, because in this cinematic sense, it tells a story. It goes full circle. Anakin is jumping, things go worse, and then here he's fully descended into his madness, his lust for power, his anger, his rage. The dark side has consumed him, so he's descended into literal hell, the molten pit. He has one last foothold. What does he do with it? What does he do with his last opportunity? He fucking strikes out at Obi Wan again. Obi Wan has attacked Anakin in the fight, but he hasn't really tried to kill him. He doesn't try to hurt him, really. He's just defended himself, even though he drew the sword first. So, what does Anakin do with his last opportunity to, extricate himself from this hell of his own making? He tries to kill his best friend, former best friend, and he just sinks deeper into the lava, and he just burns. He burns in his suffering, his hatred, his failure. That is... Like, the jumping is still fucking terrible. Anakin could have just jumped anywhere else. Just continue surfing, go anywhere else, but no, it's his single-mindedness. Like using that, on Anakin's part, it's a big fucking mistake. But from Obi-Wan's perspective, it's actually really good swordsmanship. From everything else, I think, is, like, the footwork and parts is okay. But everything else about this fight is just trash. But from the point of view of the mindset of a fencer, of a fighter, of a swordsman, Obi-Wan's reaction to the continued jumping is actually quite good. It's really good. Like, there's this tactical advice in swordsmanship: never use the same trick twice. If you do try something and it doesn't work, don't do it again, because they know you can do that, and it's like in their recent memory, like, oh, they're doing that. Okay, I'm going to do the counter. So if you want to do something multiple times, you have to sort of layer it, play mind games. Here, Anakin's just trying again and again and again to jump, do that high jump attack, and it's a little bit different each time, but it goes worse every time, because Obi-Wan is improving. He's thinking of counters, and the last time, the third jump, he just fucking completely destroys Anakin. So in that sense, like, Obi-Wan keeping a cool head and observing the fight, and like thinking, okay, he's done that before. How do I do this time? And maybe even this time, finally having the resolve to cut down Anakin, even though he's trying to attack at least, even though it's failed to. Like, it's a confusing fight. It's complicated. Anyhow, I still have the other side, which is sort of a general thing. I've been thinking about, like, because they're lightsabers. They're not swords. So the difference is they don't have all this mass and moment of inertia to contend with. It just, I'm assuming lightsabers are essentially like this. It's just the hilt, which may or may not be heavy, and then there's the blade part. But the blade part, because it's plasma, it probably doesn't have any weight, at least not any noticeable weight. So it's very fast, very nimble, very light. It's reacts very quickly, but also would feel a little bit difficult to use. I do think that the extended lightsaber does have air resistance. But yeah, it doesn't have weight, it doesn't have inertia, but it probably has air resistance, because the sound it makes when it goes through the air is quite similar to, well, see those poles there? I'm not going to take them off, but if you have a pole like that and you swing it through the air, it makes this boom, boom, boom sound. And it's not just, blade is like the wooden shaft itself vibrating in your hand. You can feel it vibrating. It's like boom, boom, boom. I think I found that very similar. I find that very similar to the lightsaber sound. So I think, well, it makes sense the lightsabers. In my opinion, it makes sense the lightsabers have air resistance, so they have the turbulent sound of making sound through the air. So they make sound. They have air resistance. Well, what does that mean? Well, they make sounds, but also, when you are moving it through the air, you get feedback to your hand. So even without the force, you would sort of be able to feel what it does. Like, imagine a big fan. You can feel it resisting. Thinner and lighter. So it's real light, but you can still feel it resisting the air. So it kind of tells you which direction it's moving in. You can sort of do these things with it. If you remind me, there's this, sometimes you hear the argument that, non-force sensitives, non-Jedi, non-force sensitives can't use lightsabers because they would just cut off their own hands. I have a Oculus Rift, and I have Beat Saber, which is essentially this rhythm game where you have two lightsabers and hitboxes and tune your music. And one of the things I've noticed there is sometimes these boxes, when it gets really fast and higher difficulties, you get lots of boxes. You don't have time to just, and bring back. You have to continue the motion. And sometimes what happens is the level is designed such that you have to cut your own hand with the lightsabers and continue. So you have to cut and then cut, and it sort of forces you to cut your own limbs off if you were a real lightsaber. And I've noticed that I can't do it because I've trained with dual wielding with sparring. I've done sparring with two swords, and it's fairly effective. I like it. What I've noticed that with the Beat Saber lightsabers is that I won't cut off my own hand because I know it's there. So I'll try to do something like that, or I'll fix for that. And the Beat Saber lightsabers don't have any air resistance or mass, but having the air resistance there would actually make it much more easy to understand and wield. But of course, for Jedi, even if it doesn't have air resistance, so you wouldn't resist the motion, you can feel the way it's in your hand. Like, move it this way, you could feel it slightly like this, you can feel it like this, you can feel it slightly like this. Yeah. If you had the Jedi can presumably just feel it anyhow. What else? One of the arguments I had in my head when I was trying to debunk my own interpretation and analysis of this fight was, what if they're using forced push for everything? When they're in weak positions where it's physically unfeasible to attack from here. What if they're using the force, like they're pressing against their own saber, or they're pushing themselves to be able to do things? Okay, that could work, but because there's two things I would say to that, like the idea that they're using the force constantly, not just enhancing their own strength and speed, but pushing on themselves to be able to do things that for us would be impossible because we don't have telekinesis. One is, in the movies generally, and in the games, I would say, you generally portray the force as being quite slow to react. Like, if you want to lift, the simplest application of the force is just to lift something, right? It's what you usually see, just lifting something, the active application. So usually when you see in the movies, it's sort of like, okay, 1, 2, and then, And when they do a huge jump, it's like, okay, and now I need to jump. So there's this, they have to sort of load it. So I don't know if they are able to do it that fast. Even in the fights when they start throwing things at each other, the force, it's usually very, very slow. It's very slow. So I don't know if it would be possible for them to actually do that. Secondly, in this fight, what I'm analyzing, when they had the force push off, and they were pretty much completely equal, that tells to me that if they're both using the force to enhance their movements, it doesn't really matter, because they're if one was using, they would have an edge. They're both here. So when they're equalized, what matters again is just their technique, their body, their strength, and their technique, how they're able to bring their strength to bear. Leverage. When you have swords like this, so as I mentioned, the strong, so you're stronger. Even if there's a force, both are force pushing each other, this would still win because it's superior positioning and technique. So in that sense, I don't think it really matters if they're using the Force. A little more complex and really depressing thought. Force prediction, like the Foresight, like when how they are able to react inhumanly fast. It's not like, as I've understood it, they don't have super fast reflexes. They don't have like a slow-mo reaction. They're just reacting because we get this impulse and just react to it. And I've tried to think about that and analyze how that would function. I have two models with which I've analyzed this fight. I need again a reference because I've written them down. Let me read them quick. So I have two ideas for how that would work. There's the I call it the roadmap, the GPS navigator, and the roadmap. So when you think about like how precognition would work, how being able to see the future would work in a fight, there's I think two ways to think about it. One is that you are able to see all the different possibilities spreading out before you, like sort of like you see everything around you right now, and you sort of navigate through that. You have like a roadmap. You see, okay, what if I go up there and there and there? Oh, it's a dead end. I shouldn't go there. Okay, what if I go here? No, that's bad. Okay, I go here. No, that's bad. I could go back here and from here continue there. So that's like the roadmap application. So you analyze possible futures and go through them, and that would essentially I would like that kind of, because that would build on essentially everything HEMA and kendo and fencing is about, like building on that like indes and the tactical awareness of how to fence. So if I'm sorry again, around with memory space. Let's continue where we left off. So the idea of like how force precognition would affect the sword fight, that's a really big question, and really a video in all of its own. Like it's if you could probably write a book about that. It's dumb stuff, but you could write a book about it. The two interpretations I've come up with are: it could work like a roadmap. You can explore and you go up and down and you find the best solution. You go, oh, okay, that would be faster, that would be better. Okay, if I go there, I'll get stuck or I'll get killed. The other interpretation is like a GPS navigator, just telling you what to do. I'm gonna go through them one by one. The idea about the roadmap is that it would build up on actual realistic sword fencing, fencing and sword fighting and kendo and all that stuff. Like the mindset you would have, and the skills you would have, it would build up on that, on top of it. So you wouldn't replace it, not really. So even if you could see the different futures, if you didn't know what they meant, like okay, he's doing that technique, which would mean that, then it wouldn't really be as useful as for someone who would be able to interpret the things that are happening. Swordsmanship. If it functioned like a roadmap, the branching paths, it would mean that the principles of, I would say, fencing and kendo would be really, really important in a lightsaber fight. Because a lightsaber is much more similar to a fencing foil. This is a rapier, this is quite heavy. But a fencing foil or epee, or a saber even, and a kendo shinai, the bamboo sword. I don't have one. In that, because it's so light, it's very fast, responsive, and nimble. You don't have to you don't have to worry about having the right body work and injuring yourself if you use wrong technique, because you can just do whatever. If you look at like Luke in A New Hope when he's holding Anakin's lightsaber, he's just lightly swinging it around. He doesn't really need to worry about it. It's not that difficult control. It's relatively easy to control. So this would mean that in a fight between two lightsabers, it should look more like fencing and kendo, really, because in fencing and kendo they have really light weapons that can't really do harm, but they've decided that a touch from the weapon is a point. And with a lightsaber, it wouldn't be a point, it would be damage. You don't need to swing hard to damage someone. You can just point with the lightsaber, you cause damage. So in that sense, bring it down to those minimalistic things would optimize a lightsaber work if it was a roadmap sort of precognition. Like the importance of the central line, excuse me, would grow exponentially. Like, and I think that's here's the thing. Count Dooku tells General Grievous in the cartoon Clone Wars, that General Grievous should occupy Count Dooku's central line to be able to win with a lightsaber. And they have this training montage. And I think one of the guys they did fencing and knew the terms, and they used it. And I think if it's a good enough principle for a non-Jedi to be able to beat Jedi, then I think it would be good enough for a Jedi, even for a Jedi against a Jedi, like with precognition. But it's difficult to tell. It's hard to say. But like the principles of like minimizing your motions and making the most effect for the least amount of effort. Like if you look at like longsword, you have a relatively heavy and slow and cumbersome weapon. It's a big piece of steel. It's relatively cumbersome. And that's because you want to actually be able to hurt someone. If it was lighter, it would be more difficult to actually hurt someone. If you, an S could be made lighter and it could be still thrust. But like, if you want to cut someone with a longsword, it has to have a certain amount of weight to be able to cause damage. Not so that it's like a fucking hammer, but it still cause damage. So what this means is when you have techniques like, let's say, Zordenhau. Zordenhau is a really big technique. You make a normal swing, you lift it up like this, and you take a big step to the side. So it's a big technique. And what does it do? Really, what it does is it allows you to win the bind and sets up. If you think of sword fighting as a turn-based battle, you both do an action and something happens. So Zordenhau is when you give up any hope of actually causing damage in the round you're in for a chance to be able to do critical damage the next round. So essentially, you strike the sword to the side, you're on top of their sword, and then you can just, from Zordenort, thrust them in the face. So a Zordenhau is a really effective technique, and you can you find it in pretty much every sword martial art, in my opinion. There is some kind of variation or interpretation or something like it. Same principles, where you big swing and you gain an advantage, then you attack. An equivalent I've sort of found in kendo is the Suryage, I think it's called. And I have a shinai, but essentially the same principle, but you don't actually strike. You're in this guard, just guard, and then you, with the heavier longsword, the longer, heavier, more difficult to wield and cumbersome longsword, you make a big motion, because the other longsword is also heavy, and you have to have a lot of power to be able to displace it. With the shinai that are very light, this is a Suburita, is quite heavy also. With a Suburita, shinai that is very light, you don't need that much effort. A minimal amount of motion will suffice, because it doesn't have inertia, the blade, opposing blade. So you just push it aside. So instead of having this big swing, you just do, I can't really do it. You clench this hand and keep this hand in place, and you do this kind of little twitch the blade. Tiny twitch. And what it causes is just enough, the minimal least amount of motion necessary for the opponent's blade to miss. It just misses. Just barely. And from there, bring it down. So with the longsword, efficiency means one thing, but with a lighter weapon, shinai, a really light shinai, it would mean something completely different. And I'm pretty sure I remember doing this the same technique with the foil, more or less, like a tiny displacement and a thrust. But with the longsword, the feder, the small motion can be something as much as like a meter swing, depending on the situation. It requires more setup because these things are heavier. So displacing another longsword requires more energy, more effort. With a shinai, it can be a matter of like 5 centimeters. With like an epee or a fencing foil, the really whippy weapons in fencing, it can be a matter of like 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter. So it becomes really achieving the most with the least possible. Maximum effect for minimum effort. And I think with a lightsaber, because of how light and responsive it would be, for non-force sensitives, it would be absolutely like that. And if the force sensitives had a roadmap, sort of like they can see all possibilities, or most possibilities, stretching out before them, and you decide sort of where they're going based on that. And then you have two forces. They're navigating around each other, like in the future. Like they're playing chess. They both see like 50 moves ahead. Like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Oh, okay, I was going to do that. But fuck that. Oh, you're doing. Oh no, never mind. So that's sort of really complex mind games. If they had that, then it would probably be like that. You wouldn't do big swings because this is a huge opening. If you can see the future, by the time I'm doing this, he would have seen it, right? And he would be charging forward. But I don't think that's what they're doing in Star Wars. I don't think Jedi have that kind of foresight, because I haven't really analyzed this. I could go really in depth and look at like a bunch of extended universe or the games or books or the Clone Wars or whatever. Just find every nugget of information about precon and visions and foresight, like the visions they have, and like analyze how they function. But I really don't care about Star Wars that much. So based on what I remember from movies, the other option I came up with was the GPS navigator. So when you're driving, you're just driving in your car, going somewhere, and you're here, left turn 50 meters. Okay, left turn. You don't question it. You trust that the thing knows where you're going. It knows the path, so you trust it. You don't have to think about it. So even if you're in a completely unknown area, in a completely unknown place, you can trust it to get you right. And I think that's more how the foresight works. Like against non-force sensitives, it's like, okay, laser bolts. Left exit 50 meters. Something like that. It just works. It just works. You don't have to question it. And then you look at like the visions, like they see the future. Oh, this could happen in the future. And then they sort of maybe can affect that. Maybe I haven't read enough of the Star Wars universe to think about that. But like, what does Obi Wan say to Luke in A New Hope when he's shooting with lightsaber against the floating thing that shoots some electric bolts at him? The Force guides him. Luke asks, does it like take over your body? Something like that. And I think like I think Anakin Obi Wan says like, yes, but you can also control it. But I've interpreted Obi Wan's response to can control it to be like the actual actions of like mind control, force choke, and stuff like that. Like when they're doing like the force frequently in the fight, I don't think they're actively doing anything. They're just trusting the navigator to tell them what's right. They're not analyzing what's going on. They're just trusting it. Their gut instinct to what they're doing. And I think that's if it is like that. I think I have read one novel, Darth Bane, and there I had a good laugh about how he explains how the lightsaber forms their work. Like you learn sequences and you just perform them. You learn different sequences and you just do them. Like, okay, that's kind of dumb. Okay, but like that sort of makes sense if it's a road navigator. Like you have this optimal course of action, and the force sort of just plays things out. Like, you look at like the when Luke destroys the Death Star, and he's trusting the Force to do it. He's closing the computer, and he's just allowing it to do its thing. Like he's not. I feel like he's not actively doing it. He's just a conduit. He's just allowing things to happen naturally. So the interpretation that it's a navigator, I think, makes sense in story and then out of story, because they are, I don't know their names, even McGregor and I don't remember, but they're actors and they learn the choreography and they're essentially going through the motion. They're not thinking about the things. They're not in this going, okay, I should actually hit here. They're going, hit, where should I go next? Hit, okay, what happens next? He grabs me, okay, grab him. They're going through the motions. They're sort of blindly trusting that, the laid out choreography. So in that sense, like the navigation, like the blindly trusting the Force to do, like to control you, being a Force puppet, sort of makes sense in a meta narrative sense that I think George Lucas would like that kind of thing, because he's a weird dude. He's a weird dude. He's a really weird dude. So I think if you look at it from the perspective of like they if you look at this, the fight I've just shown you, from the perspective of someone who doesn't have, two fighters who don't have the Force, or don't have Force recognition, or they can see branching path lines and choose the best option for themselves from that, then I think it's a terrible fight. I think it's absolute complete garbage. I think the visuals, music, and the thematic is very cool, but like the action is just very, very bad. It's But if you assume that it's instead the Force is just guiding them, and they're puppets playing out the act that the Force has willed them, and there's this sort of like fatalistic determinism going on, then yeah, it works, because they're just both trusting. Like all the training they've done with the lightsaber and all the Force training is just like the Jedi philosophy is to bring yourself closer to the Force, and the Sith and the Jedi both trying to bring themselves closer to their side of the Force and to become more one with it, and they become more controlled by it, in a sense. So I think, in that sense, maybe it works if you accept like that kind of narrative shift, like narrative. I'm gonna drink. I'm really thirsty again. From that perspective, from the meta perspective of like what the Force is and how it controls everything, it flows through everything, it controls everything, in a sense, I think the fight is okay. But it's a very convoluted thought to take, and it becomes very far removed from actual, sword fighting. It is very far removed from actual sword fighting. I think Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi I think they have better saber fights. I like them better. In terms of like flashiness appeal, I think the animated Clone Wars, especially Dooku, the 3D animation, Dooku there is just incredible. He's an absolute to watch. Yeah, I think that was everything. That was a very long rant discussion. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed this. I've been thinking about this on and off for a while now, and I'm glad to get it off my chest. I had this angry finisher for this. I'm gonna read my script because I think it's where is it? Whatever. I had this. Was it here? Oh yes, it was here. I think. Yes, I'm gonna finish with my script. Force is fatalistic and deterministic. No free will or choice. All an illusion. #Kreia was right. The Force must be destroyed. Essentially, if you live in that kind of universe, yeah, fuck the Force. The Force is fucking evil. I don't like the Force. I think it's very